The frame counter in the corner of the screen says 144. It is not dipped once, and you just turned your mouse and the whole picture snagged. Both of those are true at the same time, and neither one is a bug. Frames per second counts how many frames arrived in 1 second, which makes it an average, and your eyes have never watched a second of anything. They watch 1 frame at a time. An average is a number you get by throwing information away on purpose. If 144 frames arrive in 1 second, the average says the typical frame took about 7 milliseconds, and it says exactly that whether they arrived in a steady procession or arrived in a clump with a long empty gap in the middle. Identical count, identical average, and 2 seconds that would look nothing alike if you sat and watched them. The counter cannot tell those 2 seconds apart, because the difference it would need is the thing it deleted in order to become a single number. Your display is built around exactly that difference. Your monitor is not waiting to hear how your second went. It scans the picture out 1 line at a time from the top of the panel to the bottom, then it does it again, and how often it repeats that sweep is the number on the box, so 144 Hz is 144 sweeps every second. Between the end of one sweep and the start of the next, there is a brief interval where nothing is being drawn, and that interval, the vertical blanking period, is the only moment the picture can be swapped without a seam showing halfway down the screen. Divide 1 second by 144 and you have the whole budget, 6.9 milliseconds. Frame does not need to be fast, it needs to be on time. The machine has a deadline it did not choose, arriving every 6.9 milliseconds, whether anything is ready or not. When a finished frame is already sitting there, the swap happens inside the blanking interval and you never notice it. When nothing is ready, the display does not pause politely and it does not skip ahead. It has no new picture to put up, so it puts up the one already there for another full 6.9 milliseconds, and then it checks again. That is what a hitch is, not a frame that vanished, but a frame you were shown twice, because its replacement was still being built when the slot came around. A frame that is late by a lot is not shown twice. Here's 1 second of that game, counted honestly. 143 of its frames were quick, about 6 3/4 milliseconds each, every one of them comfortably inside its slot, and 1 frame took 35. 35 milliseconds against a slot of 6.9 is 5 slots gone. So for 5 consecutive sweeps of that panel, the display had nothing new to show and put the same picture up again. Add up the frames anyway. 143 quick ones plus the slow one is 144 frames delivered in 1 second. So the counter does the only arithmetic it knows and says 144. The average frame time across that second is 6.9 milliseconds, exactly on budget. The second was on budget, and the 35 milliseconds sitting in the middle of it were not, which means the measurement you want is not the count, it is the tail, the small number of frames that went badly, because those are the only ones you actually felt. That has a name, and it is one people already use without quite knowing what it is. A 1% low takes the slowest 1 frame in every 100 and averages them. A 0.1% low takes the slowest 1 in every 1,000. I think it is worth saying that these are a convention rather than a standard, and different tools compute them a little differently. Run it on our second though, and the shape is not subtle. 1 frame in 1,000 took 35 milliseconds, and 35 milliseconds is a rate of 29 frames per second. Same second, same frames, same game. 144 on the average, 29 at the bottom. Your eyes were reading the 29. Nothing about that slow frame is a failure. It is almost always work that only had to happen once and happened to come due on that frame. A texture that is not in memory yet has to come off your drive, and a drive charges for the errand, not for the byte. The first time a new effect appears on screen, the little program that draws it has to be compiled for your particular graphics chip before it can run even once. And the standard graphics documentation warns in as many words that compiling it inside a frame produces intermittent stuttering. Or the processor reaches for something that is not in its caches and simply waits the way it spends most of its life waiting. Every one of those is a one-off cost, and the display's clock is not a one-off anything. There is one place in that whole chain that was ever really negotiable, and it is not the frame. For most of the history of these panels, the refresh clock was fixed and the frame had to meet it, and then in 2014, the display standards body made it optional to turn the arrangement around, letting the panel match its refresh to whatever rate the machine is actually producing, frame by frame. The display waits for the frame instead of the frame waiting for the display. It is a real fix and it is not a cure. A frame that takes 35 milliseconds is 35 milliseconds of one picture either way, and all the panel can stop doing is adding its own weight on top of yours. Which brings back the counter and the snag. The counter was answering a question about the second you had just played, and it answered correctly. You've simply never watched a second of anything in your life. The snag was one frame in that second arriving too late for a deadline it was never told about, and a second is a unit the counter invented for its own convenience. The frames are the only thing that ever reached your eyes one at a time in the order they arrived. Everything you just figured out rests on something deeper, and that's the next video, so start there. Would you rather understand your computer than just use it? Then subscribe, and I'll see you next time, further down the stack.